Hello. The following is a short demonstration that walks through the introduction of a data set and the initial descriptive and summative analysis for a data set. Okay, as we begin, I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about SPSS and looking at the SPSS file that you can uh, become familiar with and what the screen looks like for a typical SPSS file once the data has been inputted into the software program. So first what we'll do is just get a look at what we call the data view. So if you go down to the bottom of the screen, we see data view, and that will give us a spreadsheet where we have rows and columns. The rows are indicated on the left hand, 1, 2, 3, and so forth. If we were to scroll down, we could look at the total data set. This data set has 100 respondents. And so we have a 100 there, and then it has a whole bunch of variables. We have something called an ID, and then we have X1, and then that goes all the way up to X23. And then inside the actual spreadsheet, we have values associated with each respondent and each variable that we have measured. So at this point then, this is fairly straightforward. After you either manually input the data or you copy and paste the data into this or you import the data, and those are all done through a variety of different ways. We have under File here, we can have import data, and then we follow the import data tab and we choose the type of data that we're drawing from. CSV data could be used, Excel or from Excel, from text, and a number of other different sources. You could also import the data directly from Qualtrics. And if you're in Qualtrics as a survey, you would export the data into SPSS, and then it would create an SPSS file for you. So let's assume, though, that you have your data inputted and that it is here in Excel. This is the data view form, and you'll also notice that there are a series of commands up above here and drop-down tables: file, edit, view, data, transform, analyze, direct marketing, graphs, utilities, and so forth. So some of these may change depending on if you have add-ons or not, but they're more or less the same across all the different versions that you may encounter. The second tab down below here would be variable view. So variable view would be the second tab. And we would look to describe the data in variable view as each variable would appear or be in your data set. So in this view, instead of rows, we really don't have rows. What we have is each variable described. And remember, we had our first variable, which was ID, and then followed by X1 all the way down to X23. So this is our place where we actually specify what type of variable we're dealing with for each variable that we have. So it's important when you set up your data set to do this and examine every single variable you have. Even if you have 100 or 200 variables, you need to specify and make sure each one is properly coded here. So just to walk through this chart or this view that we have the name, and this is the name of the variable that will appear at the header or the top of the data view. So we have whatever the variable name is, we have it here, and it will also be displayed at the top of our data view as a column header. The type question refers to what the type of data is, and it can be numeric, it can be a date, it can be text, it can be in a dollar form. So string would be a text. So if you had open-ended questions and you wanted string data, You could have open-ended text available there. Most of the time we deal with numeric, sometimes dates, sometimes strings. Oftentimes, even though it may be a dollar amount, we still refer to it as numeric. So in this case, we have all numeric data, and you can verify that by looking back into data view and just visually examining your data. I'm looking at the data and I see all numbers, so that seems appropriate that everything would be numeric. The width deals with literally how many spaces are available at the top or in each column. So this width column here really deals with the width that you see here on this page and how many spaces are available within the cell. Okay, decimals are the number of decimal places that we're going to specify for each variable. And of course, that would correspond to numeric data. The label is actually a really important column in the sense that it provides you an opportunity to describe what each variable is. Now, sometimes you may want to make this descriptive notation here actually in the name of the data. So instead of name x1, we might choose to call this one here, this second variable, we might choose to call it customer type. And then this might be industry type, and this might be firm size, and so on. So in some cases, instead of using a very non-descriptive name, sometimes we use a descriptive name, and then we don't label it here. So you can do either way. So it's just kind of a matter of preference. This data set is already set up with a label that has a description of what each variable is. Note also that this also in here has the name X12 Salesforce image, for instance. That's not necessary. You don't need that X12 in there. But again, it clarifies things a little bit better because when we pull up the data, the variables will be named by their label here when we start looking at outputs and so on. Okay, so just get familiar with how labels and names work. You can play around with this and try a couple of different things and just explore for yourself. The next column is values. Values is very important as well. So in the values specification here, what we want to do is we want to indicate what a value stands for within a variable. So here we have customer type, and we can click on this actually, and we'll expand this a little bit. So we'll look at the value label for customer type. And so what we know is that a 1 means less than 1 year, a 2 means 1 to 5 years, and a 3 means over 5 years. So in our data set, in this column that represents customer type, we're either going to see 1s, 2s, and 3s. And we won't see anything else probably, but those are what we'll see. And when we see a 3, it means that the customer has been with us for over 5 years. And then 2 and 1 are mean the appropriate things here as well. Okay, so this is important specifically if you have categorical data or non-metric data and you want to organize your data in a certain way, or you want to use factors. So the second variable here, or x2, is it's an industry type, and the industry, the customers here are either labeled a 0 or a 1. A 0 means they're in the magazine industry, and a 1 means they're in the newsprint industry. So it's important to know, like, these 0 and the 1, they really don't mean anything. There's no value associated with them. So it's like nominal data. It's just a label, and that 0 represents magazine and the 1 represents newsprint. Okay, so you can go through your entire data set, each variable, and specify here. Now, interestingly, in this data set, we have some values that are labeled here. This variable here, this x6, it's called product quality, and it's actually a metric variable. And this metric variable, it's scored on like a 0 to 10 scale, with 0 being poor and 10 being excellent. but it's really not specified here what the values are in between. All this is really a notation for us to remember that this is a scaled variable from 0 again to 10, and that those are the ranges and those are the anchors that we would have between the least and the most scored on here. Okay, so all of these here would be those types of scales. We have a satisfaction scale here. So the satisfaction scale is, again, 0 to 10, from not at all satisfied to completely satisfied. And this is actually important to know because this tells us these are all scaled on a 10-point scale. We have a likelihood to recommend, and we also have a likelihood to purchase. And then finally here, that's interesting to look at is this scale here is from 0 to 100. This is a purchase level scale. So purchase level or usage level. Okay, so this is all information that's valuable to have, that helps us understand what the values mean inside the data set. So if we looked at the data set again, we see here in column 1 a bunch of 2s and 1s and 3s. So now we know what those 2s and 1s and 3s, what they stand for. And then in column 2, we know whether this is the type of customer and what they're using our product for. We can go over all the way here. We know that number 22, that variable was scaled from 0 to 100. So these numbers, while they look way out of place, they actually mean something that we want them to mean. Okay, so these numbers are scaled differently, and we know that because they're specified under variable view, but they're also indicated here as well. So that's what we look at when we look at this values section. And to add to this specification, or actually we'll look at this a little bit more in just a second. We'll finish up these columns now. Missing deals with how we're going to deal with missing data. Don't be concerned about this area here now. We're going to deal with this missing data in our own way here in another section, but this is so don't be too concerned about that here. Column width is the width of the column that you'll actually see in the data set. So this is like when we look at data view, the actual width of the column. Versus the width here deals with the number of digits, if you will, in each data set or in each variable under data view. Role, this is input. Don't worry about this input deal here. Don't be concerned about that for right now, but do be concerned with measure. So right now we know the ID, the name, we know the type, we know the label, we know the value, and now we're going to talk about the measure. Here it's important to know whether you have nominal, ordinal, or scaled data. So remember, we talk about nominal, ordinal, then we have ratio and interval data in terms of data types. So nominal data has only a label. Ordinal data has order and a label or description. And then scale is going to have order, it'll have a label or description, but it'll also have equal distance between responses, possible responses, and it may or may not have a true origin point. Okay, so scale data is going to be metric. It'll be thought of as either interval or ratio data, and that's something we need to specify when we set up the data set as we're doing right now. So if we look at what we have a series of nominal variables, then we have a bunch of scale variables, and then we come back here and have one more nominal variable available to us. Okay, so that's the way this has to be specified, and you need to be specific about that. Now, one little add-on here, one little bit that I wanted to point out was this idea about the actual data that we have available to us. And if you'll remember, this is the HBAT data. This is from this is a sample of 100 So that's something that we saw. And then we should also have some corresponding document, which would be the data codebook. And the data codebook would describe how the data was collected, why it was collected, when it was collected, who collected it. It would also provide the survey or the actual questions that were asked within the survey or the data collection instrument itself. And it should give some type of indication in terms of what the data means or what the variable type is or what the description of the data is as well. So this is a helpful document to have in addition to your actual data set so that you can make sure and verify what is in your data set matches what's in your data codebook. Okay, so again, this is something that if you have a copy of the survey, then you can use that as your data code book. But it'll also specify what is available to you in terms of the values here and so forth. Okay, now another feature or another element that we can do here in SPSS is that we can create our own data code book based on what we have inputted. So I would strongly recommend that whenever you set up a data set, especially one you're going to use over a long period of time or you're going to refer back to from time to time, then go to File. Under File, go to Display Data File Information, and then go into Working File. Now, when I click Working File, two things are going to happen. Number one, a new window is going to open up, and it will be called our Output window. And then also within that window will be the information that we have asked for in SPSS. Okay, so I'm going to click on this and we're going to see our output file open up, and it will give us our information on our variables that we could use for a data code book. So here's the click, and now I need to find where that has been placed. Oh, there it is. Okay. All right, I had to find it, but there it is. So this window opened up. This is the output. This is an output window. So far when we're looking at SPSS, we have three things now. We have the data view, the variable view, and now the output window. The output window gives you all the information that you're going to use to do your data analysis. You can also do things like in the output window, you can click on a graph or a chart or table, and you can copy and paste them into other documents. So if you want to use a graph, for instance, from your output window, you can just right click, copy, and paste that into whatever other document you're using. So this output window then that we have has our variable information for this data set. It gives us our variable name, where the variable is in our data set, so like which column it's in, the first column, second column, third column, and so on. It has our label that we have. It has, again, the nominal or scaled data and that type of information. So that's this first chart, or this first table. Okay, this describes the data that we have. If we scroll down into the next table, it gives us all of our options that we specified under the value tab, value part of our variable view. Okay, so under the value area, we have X1. You can have a 1, 2, or 3, and this is what 1, 2, and 3 are worth, or what they mean in our data set. Okay, so all of those value pieces then are displayed here. And again, this is something that we can use as a tool to, like a data code book. It's all displayed in the output window. All right, so You've looked at your data. Again, when you look at your data, manually inspect it. Look at your data, make sure it looks right. So we know all of these scaled variables, except for 22. We know all of them should be something between 1 and 10. Now, it looks like these were done on some type of a slider or a scale. So somebody, put in 8.5 or did a slider of some point, and it's going to be between 0 and 10, right? Because that's what our values are set at. 0 being poor, a 10 being excellent. We know variable 22 here is going to be something between 0 and 100, and we know all of the other ones are some type of a nominal or ordinal type of variable. And so these ones and zeros and twos and threes here actually mean something with variable 1 through 5 and x23, variable 23. So visually inspect your data, make sure your data looks good to you, understand where you can adjust the settings for your variables under variable view, understand also the output window and what the output window looks like, and how your data set in your software should correspond to the survey or the instrument that you used via your data codebook. Okay, so now we're going to start to look at actually examining the data. And so what we'll do first is we'll look at our non-metric data, so our variables 1, 2, 3, 4, these nominal data pieces that we have here. Now with nominal data, you know that we cannot take a mean or an average. We can count frequency, and we can understand like how many times a box was chosen or something along those lines. So we're going to go to Analyze, then we're going to tab under Descriptive Statistics, and we're going to go to Frequency. Okay, so we go to Frequency, and under Frequency what we can do is we can load over the different variables that are associated with the nominal data. So we had the customer type, we had the industry type, we have a firm size and region, and we have distribution, and maybe we have this last one that we have in the data set. These are all nominal data. Okay, so we look at this, we can go to statistics. Now, this is kind of interesting because we know we can't take a mean, we can't really do a median. We can do mode, so we can calculate how often something is chosen, like which option is chosen the most. And it can't do anything with standard deviations. Range is irrelevant here. Minimum and maximum and all of these are really not useful to us because we know this is nominal data. Okay, so you could actually not click mode if you don't want to. It's not something that we would normally need to do specifically here. We could also do charts. A histogram is not something we would necessarily do. Maybe a bar chart would be. Histograms we may do with, we can do a histogram. We'll do a histogram here and just see what happens. Okay, so we'll do a continue, and we're going to do frequency tables. We can display frequency tables. We would want to do that specifically. So check frequency tables, because this is all nominal data. So frequency tables here, statistics, you really don't need to check anything, but if you wanted to check something, you do mode, and then we have charts and a variety of different charts that we can look at. We can look at bar charts. Let's look at bar charts instead. Okay, so we're going to do that. We're going to do that. Now, the way this is going to work out is when we click that, and I have this just simply on another screen, the output file pops up and it calculates the information that we have. So we have our variable information from before, so that was the last thing that we did. Now we have this new thing we asked for, frequencies, for X1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 23. And then we had statistics and then a bar chart, and we're going to go from there. So if we look at our statistics then, it tells us how many people responded and how many didn't. So missing data is here, and then the valid responses for each variable, x1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 23. And then we have a mode. And again, this is kind of like something we'll see later on in each of these individual charts. But so the number 2 was the most frequently responded to item or option in X1, 0 in X2, and so on. So this may or may not be useful to have. We have asked for frequency tables, so that's really where we'll come up with this. So we have 5 or 6 different frequency tables. We have one for each variable. So our frequency table for X1 customer type. So this is here where the label was important, where we have less than 1 year, 1 to 5 years, and then over 5 years. And we have our frequency percentage, and then cumulative frequency here. So here, 35 out of 100, that was the most frequently chosen. And that was our customer type. We have the industry type, we have the firm size, region, distribution, and then the strategic alliance question, where we asked whether the customer would consider us strategically aligned with them. So that was that last question, X23. So those are the frequencies. This helps us better understand how evenly weighted, I guess, our data is. We'll also want to split up our data at various times to be able to do some between group analyses. So this helps us better understand what we're dealing with our factors, where we'll do ANOVAs and such later on, and we'll do between group analyses. So we also asked for the bar charts to be performed here on this. So bar charts provide us information on just visual graphical information on how these all play out. And so we can just kind of look and visually see this region here. We had, it looked like a good percentage more who provided us information from outside the North America region versus a domestic customer. But otherwise, that's pretty straightforward. This is descriptive data. This is descriptive information that we're using. We could also gather the chart information by going to the graphs area, the graphs area, and going to Chart Builder and clicking on Chart Builder. And then what we could also do there is we could choose bar, and so we're going to choose a bar, and then we could go here and we could choose the customer type, and then we could press OK. And again, we're going to have the output file give us this information, the same information that we had before. It's just we used a different method to obtain that chart. We went to Graph, then Chart Builder, and it allowed us to do that. Now, one thing I will point out that I didn't mention earlier, if you are in Data View and Variable View, you'll have this top ribbon. So that the very top ribbon that's available to you with file all of that information, that's all there for you in this Data View or Variable View. That information, for the most part, is also available to you in the output window as well. So you see here, I went ahead and just ran this information from the output window, and it worked perfectly fine. Okay, so for nominal data, then you want to get an understanding of the frequency, cumulative frequency, get an understanding of maybe graphically display those as well, and that will help you out there. For other types of data, for for the scale data, we need to know more information, and so we need to do a little bit more in terms of what we're looking at. So go to Analyze, and then go to Descriptive Statistics, right? Now, what is helpful here is if you can go to descriptive statistics and then you can go to descriptives. That's one thing you can do, and take some of your your scale variables. Like I'll just look at X6 for right now. So I'm just looking at that, and I can go to options and I can ask for whatever I want really here. Kurtosis, skewness, variance, standard deviation, mean. We know the minimum here will either be a 0 or a 10. So those aren't really very useful. You can also list this data out graphically or numerically or by alphabet, things like that. I'm just going to click OK there, and I'm just going to go ahead and do OK just for now, just so you can see what this looks like. So it's the basic information that we asked for. It has the mean, it has the minimum, the maximum. So interestingly, the minimum here is 5, where it could have been 0. So we have a very narrow range of data, and then we have our statistic test, our skewness statistic and kurtosis statistic, as well as our standard deviation. So that's kind of the information that's helpful. A better way, or another way that we'll want to do this though, will be to go into descriptive statistics and then go into explore. So I'd recommend doing this for your scale data. Go to explore. And then go into this. So we have our explore options that are available to us here. We can, and I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to take X6 and I'm going to place it over there. We have better options when it comes to making our our graphs here, and we'll also want to use this information when we look at our assumptions that we want to test later on. So like one of our tests is for normality, and this explore option will help us better do that. So we can also look for outliers here, descriptive statistics, and so on. So that's sort of what this is a more powerful way to explore your data. When we test for our issues relating to our data, we'll go into here. For now, just do descriptive. We'll go to plots. We can do a histogram. You may or may not do a stem and leaf. I would rather just do a histogram here probably. We can do a box plot. We can also test for normality. We can do different like PP and QQ plots, which we'll use at some point here to test for normality as well. Okay, so there are going to be a lot of good options here that we're going to use later on, beyond what we're doing here today. Let's look at okay, so if we want to deal with missing data in a specific way, we would list either do it list-wise or pair-wise missing data analysis. So we can do that if we want. Again, we're not going to worry about that right now. We're not going to worry about bootstrapping either. We're just going to do this and look at our data for product quality. Click OK. So X6, again, we have our N reported up above here. Then we have our descriptive data based on what we have, based on our deviation and the spread of the data. We have 95% confidence intervals. So where we would expect the data to fall in repeated measures over time, that's kind of where we would be. Between a 7.5 and an 8.0 is where we would expect 95% of our samples to fall. So we have a standard error associated with our mean. We also have down here our statistics for skewness and kurtosis and their standard errors, which we will use later. We have our variance, our standard deviation. So we're good. So that's one of the things we want to look at. And we also have reported here our histogram. So the distribution of our data, and this looks fairly normally distributed, although it is interesting again that the scale could be from 0 to 10 and we have no responses below 5. So this is probably maybe skewed to some degree. It's also hard to tell whether it's peaked or flat, but we'll get a better understanding with skewness and kurtosis values later on. The other thing that we have is what we call a box plot. So the box plot, or the box and whiskers type of data here, it gives us our median response. It also gives us our upper and lower quartiles, our middle quartile rather. So the second and third quartiles were first and second or fourth are up and below, and then it has our range indicated here as well. Okay, so this helps us describe the spread of the data. Again, a picture or a description of what we can have here for that. We can do this for lots of variables at once. So we can do analyze, describe, explore. We can do multiple variables here. So here's x7 and here's x8 and here's x9. We'll do OK. And so after we do OK, we're going to have, now we've got 4 variables that we're looking at. And again, we have the data for all 4 variables that are returned to us. We have the histograms and box plots for all 4. So there's the histogram and box plot for x6. Now we have a histogram and box plot for x7. That's there. One of the things you'll notice here with SPSS is we do have indicators of outliers in the box plot. So for x7, there are, it looks like 5 or 6 different variables that appear to be outside of normal for this particular variable. And we may want to go in and examine those closer. But again, we'll look at that in another video. This is just the descriptive, getting to know your variables better. The very last thing that we'll look at is sometimes we want to look at how 2 variables go together, and we can do that as a preliminary type of a thing. Now we can look at our data, and if you think about how our data should go together, we know that we have some variables that we think would be correlated. So we can go into analyze, and then we can go to correlate, and then we can go to bivariate. And again, this is part of getting to know your data. We know that one of our key variables is likelihood to purchase. So we're going to have likelihood to purchase here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say certain things we think influence likelihood to purchase. So maybe advertising, maybe sales force image, maybe competitive pricing, maybe claims and warranties, maybe price flexibility. We're just going to throw some of these in here just as an illustration to see, like actually look at correlations between variables. And again, this is something we'll get into more in the course, but right now, as a preliminary scan of your data, you want to get a feel for if your data is behaving the way we think it should. So let's look here, likelihood to purchase, and then we have these variables we think are probably associated with likelihood to purchase. And advertising here is, so like the actual correlation, the R, 0.191, that's pretty low. We may not think of that as something that would be correlated with likelihood to purchase based on this data. However, we look at Salesforce image and we got a 3.329. That's much larger, and it's actually indicates here that this relationship would probably be significant, and we look at a two-tailed significance test, 0.001. That would be a strong indicator of significance. competitive pricing. Okay, so this would be like the competitor's pricing is maybe either, if it's more favorable, then the likelihood to purchase our product would be less. So negative is the correct sign. And 0.194, again, it's not super strong in terms of a correlation. So that would be something to, to consider. Um, kind of in the direction that we were looking at, but not real strong. Warranty and claims is another one here that seems to be fairly strong. So warranty and claims is correlated to 0.316. Price flexibility does not appear to be correlated at all with likelihood to purchase. Okay, and then we had that's kind of it. So that's all I want to do is look at this kind of briefly, because now what we can do is we can take these two variables and we can start looking at them graphically. And so to do this, I'm going to go into Chart Builder, and now I'm going to look at something called maybe a scatter plot. Right, we already looked at histograms when we looked at the spread of the data to see what the data looked like as a single variable. Now I'm going to look at more than one variable at a time, and we're going to do scatter. And I'm going to take this, I'm going to drag it up, and I'm going to look at two different variables. So I'm going to look at one variable will be likelihood to purchase, and I just want to spread this out a little bit, give us a little bit more space so we can see. So likelihood to purchase, I'm going to drag that over to there, and then I'm going to look at let's see, warranty and claims. That seemed to be one that was fairly significant. So we're going to look at warranty and claims. The other ones was Salesforce image. So let's look at warranty and claims first, though. And we're just going to look at these two variables. Let's click OK. And this is the scatter plot for these two variables. Now, they're not super correlated, but they were significantly correlated. And we have sort of an upward trend, if you will. Even though there's a lot of spread between here, we have an upward trend. And there may be some variables here that we would discard as outliers, but generally speaking, that's the trend that follows. We can go ahead and graph. Let's go Chart Builder again. Instead of warranty and claims, let's look at the what is it, price line, the Salesforce image. Salesforce image. Let's look at Salesforce image instead. We're going to do OK. And again, we have kind of a general upward climb here. Again, it was correlated at like 0.3, 0.36 or 0.31 or something like that. So we have some confirmation of the correlation based on this image. If we wanted to look at two variables that were not correlated at all, we could look at maybe what do we have here? Price flexibility, was that one of them? We'll look at that and just see if price flexibility is there. And then we have, maybe even a flat line here. There's really not much going on in terms of a pattern that would be discernible. Okay, so this description then, this video here helps understand and describe an introduction to understanding your data, nominal data and metric or scale data. Those are the things that you want to be considering in terms of describing. And this just walks through some basic understandings of how we do a basic analysis.